This podcast was produced from an Elevate live webinar.
Welcome to the Elevate podcast, brought to you by the Registered Master Builders. Each week we explore the ideas and practices that help us get the best from our businesses, our teams, and ourselves. I'm your host, Ryan Castle. We talk to experts, advocates, and business owners in the construction industry to share their knowledge, insights, and experiences to help you build a better business and enjoy a better life. Now let the business building begin.
Thank you to those of you who have joined. Really appreciate you making some time to join us on the webinar this evening. My name is Ryan Castle. I help run the Elevate learning platform at the Master Builders, and very excited to be joined by Sam Archer. Sam, would you be kind enough to just give us a bit of a intro, your background, how have you ended up in this role, and how are you so well qualified to take us through the webinar tonight?
Yeah, kia ora, Ryan, and everyone else. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us this evening and giving up your some of your evening to hear me speak. Yeah, great. So I've had 20 years in the construction industry, and as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm English, and I came over here 6 years ago. I've got a Kiwi wife and two very Kiwi children, yeah, so I've been a building services engineer by training really at the beginning of my career. I spent 6 or 7 years designing the heating and ventilation systems, but then increasingly got interested in sustainability, and I've spent the last 10 to 15 years really working on climate change, energy efficiency, sustainability in the built environment. So that's my background.
Fantastic, Sam. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to hand over to Sam to take us through the presentation.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Ryan. All right, yeah, before we get going, I'm just going to give you a very quick, I promise it'll be a quick overview of the New Zealand Green Building Council. So we are a membership organisation, so we like to think we're the kind of sustainability voice of the construction industry. So we've gone from 31 members to well over 500 members in 2020. We pretty much got membership from throughout the construction industry, from the property owners right through to universities, the agents, lots of builders. And although that slide does have a lot of kind of like the big kind of corporates up there, we do have a lot of kind of long tail of mum and pop kind of small companies as well that are members of us. So yeah, fundamentally we work with our members, and we're the voice of construction when it comes to sustainability.
Right.
All right, we've got 6 corporate sponsors every year. So out of our membership, we get a sort of closer relationship with 6 of those, and they help us to drive even more change. So these are our current corporate sponsors. Great. So just a bit of an overview of what we do. So before I sort of launch into the rating tools, I'd just like to talk about the 3 main things that we do as an organisation. So we do lots of advocacy. So as I'm going to talk about a bit later on, the MBE has just announced that they're going to be doing a major review of the building code. They're looking at setting long-term trajectories through to 2035 in really improving the energy performance, and we'd like to think that a large part of the reason that they're doing that is because of the massive amount of lobbying and sort of egg throwing that we've been doing at MBE, trying to get them to improve the quality and standards of our homes.
Sam, maybe let me dive in a question that probably fits reasonably well around here.
Yeah, sure.
Jared thinks your question said, are there other sustainable home schemes in New Zealand, or is this the New Zealand Green Building Council? Do you kind of have the market captured? Give us an insight of the lay of the land.
That's a really great question. So in terms of holistic sustainability, so covering all of the bases, so energy, water, waste, we're pretty much the only game in town. If you want to just concentrate on energy and I guess health, good ventilation systems and so on, then there is the Passivhaus, the German Passivhaus standard. We work very closely with Passivhaus. Passivhaus is incorporated in Homestar, so you can do Passivhaus to do the kind of energy and health and comfort kind of elements, and then all of the other stuff like sustainable materials and stormwater runoff and all the other bits and pieces that Homestar does. So they're complementary. There's another holistic sustainability rating called the Living Building Challenge, which is an international one, an American one, but that's really crazily out there. I mean, that's kind of really deep green tool, and it's so deep green that only 23 projects have ever certified in the whole world. We've had one project in New Zealand, which was I always forget the name of it, but it's in the Bay of Plenty anyway, and it wasn't a home, it was a marae.
It wasn't a school that recently got $11 million in grants. It wasn't.
No, that was a
No?
green school.
No,
No,
okay.
no. Don't know what
Okay.
they're doing. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we do training. So, obviously I'm sort of giving some training at the moment, but most of our training is in the tools that we run. So as I'll go on to talk about, we run a training program for getting people trained up as assessors, so people who can actually do the Green Star and Homestar assessments. So we also benchmark, and then finally, this tool is about Homestar, but really our bread and butter is running racing tools, because we really strongly think that if you want to avoid greenwash, then you need to be designing to or certifying under a known national standard, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit later. So we run effectively 3 different racing tool schemes. We run Green Star, and they're for commercial buildings, so I won't really say much more about that today. But for homes, for new homes, we run a scheme called Homestar, and then for existing homes, we run a scheme called HomeFit, which is an inspection-based scheme where you can go into an existing home and look at its levels of insulation, look at its ventilation systems, and so on, and give the home a HomeFit stamp. Okay, so just a little bit of background, really, which is trying to talk about some of the problems we've got with New Zealand homes, and the reason why we really think we need much better standards and why we need Homestar. So Brands does a house condition survey every 5 years. They have been running it since 1994. So I think this is the 5th one from memory that they did a few years ago. And really, what's a bit depressing about these kind of 5-yearly surveys is that they keep on revealing the same thing, which is something that I think everyone knows, which is that New Zealand has a very poor record when it comes to very damp, mouldy, cold houses. So there's a real law of halves here. So around half of the 560 homes they analysed in the last one had very poor substandard insulation. Around half of those homes didn't have mechanical kitchen or bathroom extract systems, and a great deal of them really didn't have adequate heating systems either. And what's been really good about this last condition survey is they've managed to link really the condition of the house to some of the things that the house is lacking. So, the houses that don't have enough insulation or poor ventilation systems or poor heating systems are generally the ones with lots and lots of mold. So we know from the international research what we need to be doing with houses. It's just that we're really not doing it, which is a real shame. And you kind of go, well, there's a bit of a Kiwi thing around just throwing another jumper on. And, maybe some of us from an energy perspective thinks that's a good idea, but really from a health point of view, it's a really, really bad thing. So New Zealand has some of the highest rates of asthma in the OECD, so asthma, well, not just asthma, respiratory disease generally. And that results in some really poor outcomes in terms of attendance at school. We also have high winter excess deaths, so around 1,600 excess people. More people die in the winter than they do in the summer, largely because of being in cold homes. And there's a really interesting paradox there, which is that more temperate countries, more sort of warmer countries like New Zealand, tend to have higher excess winter deaths. So Portugal is another country, as an example, that has high winter deaths, and that's because we kind of design for the 9 months of the year when it's nice and warm. But even in Auckland, where I live, it still gets very cold in the winter, and it's those few months when we get those excess winter deaths. Okay, and I suppose as I'm going to go and talk about, Homestar is really about new homes. And some people might say, well, new homes, because of the building code, have to be insulated. But as I'll go on to talk about, they're really not insulated enough. They don't have enough ventilation systems. They don't have enough heating systems. They don't have enough of all of the kind of elements that make for a warm home. And this is some research that was done on homes built post 2000, so homes that that are insulated. And what those bars are showing is the percentage of the time in living rooms, that's the grey bar, when the air temperature was less than 19 degrees over the winter months, and the yellow bars are the bedrooms. So you can clearly see bedrooms are the biggest problem. Bedrooms pretty much all of the time in those 20 houses were under 19 degrees. And the World Health Organization says that at the very, very least, homes need to be 18 degrees all year. including at night. And for the vulnerable, so the elderly, the sick, and children, they really should be achieving 20 degrees. And all of the brands research that's been done over the many years has shown that New Zealand homes are getting absolutely nowhere near that. They're just too damn cold for our health. Okay, and I'm sure I'm teaching you what you know already, but really the reason that we've got to this situation is that we've got a really inadequate building code when it comes to some of these elements. So the levels of insulation that are required in H1 of the building code are a lot lower than they are in comparable countries. Brands, if you dig out the article, actually, brands did a really good comparison of our building code with the UK one. So arguably parts of New Zealand are quite a bit warmer than the UK generally, but actually, if you start getting to the South Island, if you look at Christchurch as an example, isn't that much warmer, sorry, than London. But the insulation levels required are substantially more in the UK than they are here. And actually, I've got some numbers to show that later on. And then other countries, once you've then dealt with the just sort of general R values, then we need to be dealing with thermal bridges. So that's kind of missing insulation from corners, missing insulation from eaves, poor detailing around the installation of windows, and concrete lintels, metal lintel, all the kind of areas where the thermal insulation is broken, and that's where we see mold in new homes, and we still see lots of poor detailing when it comes to that. Little provision for good ventilation. So it's now become a requirement in the last couple of years for New Zealand homes to be fitted with mechanical kitchen and bathroom extract. That only came in, I think, in 2018, maybe 2019, but it's pretty recent. But what some of the other countries around the world, so America, the UK, a few other countries, what they've moved to is the realization that as we're building much more airtight homes, so as we're using all those wraps and air barriers within our homes, then actually the brand's research shows that it's happening here, that our homes are becoming pretty airtight. And when they get very airtight, you then have a problem with ventilating the whole home. So not just kitchens and bathrooms, but also bedrooms, the general habitable rooms, and really the way the building codes have started to move in other countries, and I think the New Zealand building code will move over time, is to require whole house ventilation systems, so mechanically ventilating the whole house, not just the kitchens and bathrooms. There's no requirement for efficient heating in the building code. There's no requirement to put in any heating at all, so that's not controlled. And again, what the international research shows is that, particularly in lower socioeconomic households, or households with less money, around concern about their heating bills, if they're relying on electric resistance panel heaters or even worse, portable gas heaters, then the costs of heating are just often prohibitive for them, and they don't use heating properly. They don't turn on the heating, and they get poor outcomes. Now, another sort of interesting sort of emerging problem, and I suppose we should probably put our hand on our heart and say this is really a problem of more insulated homes. So as we're building more apartments, as we're building more better insulated homes, we are starting to see, and the evidence is emerging in New Zealand, of homes starting to overheat, particularly in our warmer climates, so Auckland and above. I think we'd probably admit actually that the Homestar Scheme, although it does deal with overheating a little bit, doesn't do it as well as we'd like, and so that's something we're dealing with the latest version of the tool. But overheating can be a real problem for people sleeping at night, and so that's something that we need to deal with. And then finally,
Sam, can I jump in there?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of a question. Another question is coming from Jared. Thank you. And I'm interested in the commercial aspects of what's going on around green and sustainability and efficient housing. Will you be actually talking about what's going on kind of commercially in the market from those, as in how many people are demanding it, how many are being prepared to pay more for their build because
Sure, yeah, no, I'll get on to that. Yeah, I will go on.
Okay,
I've got a few slides about it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, and then just that last one, last bullet point there. So there's nothing on water efficiency or lighting efficiency, and actually, it's quite interesting because, and I'll go on to talk about this a bit later. MBE have just put out a consultation on the future of the building code, And it's really great to see that they are now actually starting to talk about pretty much all of those things. So hopefully some of those things will start to change. All right, actually I'll skip that slide really, but that one's just really emphasizing that it's not just the building council saying that, that's also the International Energy Agency has criticized our building code, and so has the OECD. Yeah. All right, so it's not just health and well-being and making people warmer, but it's also climate change. So again, other parts of the world, the EU, for example, since 2002, they've been on a trajectory towards nearly zero energy homes. So they set themselves a target in 2002 of making all of the homes in the EU, new homes, nearly zero energy by 2020, which of course, and we've now arrived at that date. And of course, not every EU country has got to what they call a nearly zero energy home, but many of them have got very close to that. And the result has been over 18 years, they've tightened up their building codes to the point where the homes, you know, and I know the UK very well, new homes built there are extremely energy efficient.
And Sam, maybe could you dig into what like nearly zero means? Is that the design of the house is just so efficient that it actually doesn't require mechanical heating or ventilation that we're talking about, or is it that there's a balance of things going on?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So it's pretty much impossible to design a home that doesn't use any energy at all. You know, homes are always going to use some lighting, and so I mean, some people use these kind of definitions around net zero energy, which is around adding extra PV on and things like that on the roof to make up for any energy that you do use. But the EU wanted to concentrate on making homes that inherently themselves use very little energy. So they had this kind of, it's a bit of a technical sort of description of how you describe a nearly zero energy home, and it's really one that has minimum energy use cost effectively, I suppose, is the way to describe it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and then we move on to rating schemes like Homestar. So as I said earlier on, the thing that we advocate for is having a national standards, nationally agreed standards around what a green home means. And that's really what the Homestar system is trying to achieve. So that's kind of is a nice segue to the Homestar scheme. So Homestar was put together in 2011, and it was a partnership between us brands and an organisation called Beacon Pathway, who've done a lot of research and work into healthy and energy efficient homes. And when it was first conceived, it was a scheme on a star scale from 1 star to 10 star. And the idea originally was that 1 star would be, you know, a really poorly performing, very badly insulated, very old home, leaky, moldy, you know, right through to 10 star being international best practice, you know, in terms of, you know, so fully passive house, fully self-sufficient in energy, that kind of idea. Over time, it became very apparent that Homestar was really only being used for new homes or homes being very, very substantially refurbished. I think it probably doesn't come as a surprise that not many people wanted to go through the whole kind of exercise of getting a home rated only to be told it's got a 1 star or a 2 star. So we really found that not many people were willing to do that, unsurprisingly. And as a consequence of that, in 2017, when we released the current version, which is version 4, we got rid of the 1 star to 5 stars, and really started concentrating and honing in on and getting a minimum standard of 6 star for new homes. So that's really what we've been working on from now on. So what's in the tool? About half of Homestar, half of the points available for the home are in the category that we call EHC. And that's energy, health and comfort. And a bit later on in this presentation, I'll break down really all the different aspects of what we think makes an energy efficient, healthy and comfortable home. So I'll talk about that a bit later. But just to briefly touch on some of those other things, so we have 12% of the tool available for water efficiency. And that's kind of an interesting one because, you know, a lot of people will say, well, New Zealand is a very damp country. We get a lot of rainfall. So why is it important for homes to be water efficient? Well, you only have to look at Auckland at the moment with the drought that we're experiencing to see that actually it's not just a question of having high rainfall, but it's also all the infrastructure, the dams, the pumps, the pipes that you need in order to get water to homes. So we very strongly advocate that there's a very cost efficient reason to make homes as water efficient as they can. We then look at waste in the tool. So waste would be dealing with construction waste mainly, and again, around 50% of around half of the waste sent to landfill every year comes from the construction industry. That's a real problem, and so we have some points in the tool for reducing construction waste, and I'll probably touch on that a little bit later on. We've then got a category around management, and that's dealing with things like the environmentally friendly management of your building site. And again, I'll mention that a bit later, but having environmental management plans in place for the construction site. Then the final couple of categories, materials, deals with sustainable sourcing of the materials that you use for your build. So that would be things like using FSC or PEFC timber, so forestry, making sure that you're sourcing your timber from merchants that are, making sure that we're not dealing with deforestation, things like that. Then finally, that site category is looking at things like whether you're building on greenfield or brownfield, or things like whether your site is next to some amenities, so things like that. All right, and fundamentally, Homestar is a points-based system, as I mentioned earlier on. So there's 120 points available in the whole of the technical manual, and you need to get half of them, so 60 points in order to get a 6-star rating. Then it's easy to remember, 70 points for a 7-star, 80 points for 8-star, and so on. And then, for the highest rating, you need 100 points. So we've registered, I think, around 10,000 homes under the scheme to date, and we've had, I think, it's either 35 or 38. I can never remember the exact number, but I think it's around 35 homes have achieved 10-star. To sort of give an example of what the scheme, how tough the 10-star scheme is. So this is now a sort of segue to that question around take-up. So as I said, we've registered about 10,000 homes in total, but last year we registered 3,000. So we've been running it for 10 years, and the last couple of years is really when things have started to accelerate. So we registered 3,000 homes in the last financial year. I think it's fair to say that most of those registrations, I haven't got the exact figures, but probably about 2/3 of those registrations would be as a result of the fact that Kiwi Build, Kāinga Ora, so Housing New Zealand, and Panuku in Auckland have been mandating Homestar at a government level within what they're doing. In particular, Kāinga Ora with their social housing, so the sort of ex-Housing New Zealand houses are now all required to be at least a 6-star rating. So, if you're building with any of the sort of major house builders that are building Housing New Zealand homes, then you will be required to deal with Homestar. And then HLC, the Homes, Lands and Communities, that's now been folded into Kāinga Ora, they're doing a lot of the sort of government's major land development and selling off parcels of land to private developers for building. Again, they are pushing Homestar in a lot of the developments that they work on. And then finally, they're with the aged care retirement village type providers, so MetLife Care, Oceania, and Bupa. They've all been requiring Homestar on pretty much everything they do. So I suppose that's a bit of a roundabout way of saying we haven't fully got on board private house builders building kind of those the typical house builder in New Zealand, which is the GJ Gardens building a house for a single householder. We're not seeing a huge amount of that market, but having said that, because a lot of those house builders, major house builders, are building for Housing New Zealand, they're now getting more and more experience of building to Homestar. And I think the result of that is going to be them saying, well, actually, do you know what? Homestar really is not as difficult as people thought it was. And so we're going to start making that as an offering in terms of our private builds. Some of the builders in the audience, I'm sure, will know that I think a lot of that is being driven by the fact that I've got a slide on this later on, but I'll mention it now, which is that ANZ have been for a while now been running their Healthy Homes program. And some of that's around sustainable lending for retrofitting, insulation, and things like that. But the big one for new homes is that they're offering quite a hefty reduction in mortgage rates if you build to Homestar. So not just building to Homestar, but also buying. So if you buy an existing Homestar home, then you can get a major reduction in your mortgage rate. There definitely is some private building with Homestar, and this is an example in Hobsonville Point. And here you're starting to see some of the some of the advertising around Homestar. Here they're saying guarantee you a warmer, drier, healthier home.
So Sam, let me throw another question at you, which might be a little more challenging, and it's off the back of a question from Jared, who has mentioned, of course, we already face very high building costs in New Zealand compared to other countries globally. So if we're meeting with a client and we're going, hey, we'd really suggest you do a Homestar rated house, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rated, that is going to cost you more to build up front, design and build up front. Does Green Building Council, do you have any data that would say, notwithstanding occupant behaviour, totally understand that, but is there anything that says, hey, look, for the extra, X thousand dollars you spend now, the lifetime cost of your house is likely to be this much less because you will be spending less on, call it artificial heating, etc. Do you have any info around that people could potentially share?
We do, yeah. And but before I drill into the numbers, one thing I will say is that what we very strongly argue is that the minimum building code is inadequate. So we shouldn't be building damp, mouldy homes, and so spending some extra on making your house not unhealthy is just a good thing to do. But in terms of people want to talk about the costs, and typically the cost of a 6 Homestar might be around 2% extra in terms of the construction costs, so it's quite minor. But when I say 2%, 2% would be really when people have got good experience of doing Homestar, so they've got supply chains going. I think it's fair to say it can be a little bit more expensive if you're building a one-off home and you're getting to grips with the scheme. And then I guess the other one would be, look, 6 Homestar is right at the bottom of the scale. It's the entry point, and we'd really encourage people to be building at 7-star or even 8-star. And what we're really finding is the house builders that have started building with us are now typically building at 7 or even 8. And there certainly the cost would be a bit more, maybe 5-6% for 7 and a bit more for 8. I think the other thing that I would argue as well is that we're building very large homes in New Zealand. So, we build the 3rd largest homes in the OECD, in the world. So after America and Australia, and those 200 square meter homes, maybe, you could reduce the home by 10 square meters, 15 square meters and build a home that's much, much more energy efficient and warmer and drier and healthier. I think personally, I would rather do that.
Yeah. And Sam, I think again with my kind of commercial hat on, I think it's also important where construction companies decide to compete in the market. If you're really trying to compete on price alone and you're going for cheapest, quickest, then this kind of is probably not where you're going to be talking. If you're trying to differentiate yourself in the market and find a way to stand out from the crowd and potentially attract that buyer who's maybe a little bit more premium, that is actually going, I value the additional cost and I'm going to choose you as my construction company because I get that you get how Green Star works and you get the value and I can talk about lifetime costs, etc. Then it can be a differentiator.
I totally agree with that, Ryan. And I suppose another way of looking at that is why not offer it as an option? So you offer it as an option and it comes with a little bit of a cost premium, but it gives you an extra string to your bow.
That's right. And further on that, Sam, then what's your sense of architects' understanding of Homestar? So if a client or us as a kind of construction company goes back and says to generally architects going, hey, look, we'd like to see some options around doing an 8-star home versus a 6-star. What's your sense of kind of how capable the architectural industry is at the moment to do that?
It's definitely increasing. So we're seeing more and more architectural practices get some of their architects trained as Homestar assessors or Homestar practitioners. So we had 2 types of Homestar, I guess, professional Homestar practitioner, which is a 1-day course that you can do online and allows you to say that you know about the scheme, you know how it works, and you can design to it. And then if you do then a second day, which is in-house training with us, then you can call yourself a Homestar Assessor, and that's somebody you can go in and assess the plans and get it across. And you know, lots of architects out there have that qualification and are able to give that advice. Yep.
Okay, great.
I'll just move on to another sort of emerging thing which is happening, which is that councils have now started to talk about putting these Homestar, HomeFit, and other kind of sustainability tool Passivhaus ratings on the LIM. We just got knocked back a bit, unfortunately, which we're a bit annoyed about, which is that the big council, Auckland Council, had been talking about it for 2 years. And we got them signed across the line, and then suddenly a few councillors came in, and I think because of COVID, they've wanted to sort of cancel a lot of projects, and they're not doing it in Auckland, but Wellington are, and we're in talks with quite a number of councils around putting Homestar on the LIM, which is really good to see. All right, so I promised I would delve a little bit into the sort of technical ins and outs, and I'm not going to do that for all of the categories, but I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the big category, which is energy, health and comfort. So the first one there, EHC1, is worth 20 points out of the 120, so it's our biggest category, and that's really looking at the thermal performance of the envelope of the home, so levels of insulation primarily, there's that one. We've then got some stuff around efficient space heating, so I guess the cheaper to run the heating system that you put in the home, the more points you get under that one. We've then got a whole category around ventilation systems, and that's really dealing with some of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, which is the more you mechanically ventilate the whole house, so the more you move towards whole house mechanical ventilation with heat recovery type systems, the more points you get. Yep, so that's how that one works. Then EHC4, surface and interstitial moisture. That one is really dealing with thermal bridging, so making sure that we've got insulation around the complete perimeter of the home, and then also dealing with interstitial moisture, so that's around the design of air and vapor barriers within the construction itself. Hot water heating, that's a little bit like that efficient space heating credit, so that gives you the more efficient, the more energy and cost effective your heating system is, the more points you get for that one. Lighting as well is pretty self-explanatory. That's around the energy efficiency of the lighting system that you put in. That one's kind of interesting one actually, because in V5 we're kind of moving away from having a lighting credit, just because I'm sure the builders in the audience will know this, that it's pretty much standard practice now for LED lighting to be put in new homes, just because LED lighting is the standard. So there we go. EHC7 natural lighting is dealing with daylight, so we've got some minimum standards around daylight in living rooms, kitchens and bedrooms. Pretty obvious. Renewable energy EHC8 would be around the energy systems that you might put on the house, and 99% of the time that'll be PV systems on the roof. Although we do sometimes also get people putting in domestic hot water solar systems as well. And then the last two there, inclusive design. So inclusive design is all around universal design, so designing the house to make sure that it's accessible for the elderly or for people kind of in wheelchairs or that kind of thing. Last one there, energy efficient drying. So that's around making sure that any drying that you have in the home is unlikely to be throwing lots of moisture into the home. So making sure you've got energy efficient dryers. All right, so those are the main categories in EHC in energy, health and comfort. So I mentioned the R values earlier on, and as I was saying, EHC1, that first credit is 20 points. So really just to put some firmer numbers around R values that we ask for and what the UK is currently asking for. So the UK in 2002 had these kind of R values, so wall around R3, roofs around R4, same with floors. So even in 2002, actually, the floors at R4 were still requiring sort of fully insulated floors. Windows at 0.5, again, that would be a pretty high-performing double glazing unit, even in 2002. But over time, the UK has really toughened the R values, and they're really, really pretty high now. And as you see with air tightness now, it's a requirement of the the UK building code that you pressure test a home and find out how airtight it is. And the minimum is 10, but actually typically houses are achieving 5 air changes in their pressure testing. So we just compare that with the New Zealand building code in Christchurch. So that's requiring R2 and R3.3 in the walls and roofs. Floor at R1.3, so that's deemed, and that means that there's no requirement at all, even the colder climates, to insulate the slab. The window is 0.26, so that would be a completely standard unthermally broken aluminium frame window. So for 6 Homestar, which, as I say, is the very sort of bottom rung of the Homestar ladder, these are the kind of R values that we require. So as you can see, for walls and roofs, that's a sort of incremental improvement, a little bit better. For floors, R1.8, that would be requiring at least slab insulation, edge insulation or under slab insulation. And then windows, that would be requiring things like coatings on windows and typically thermally broken frames as well. For airtightness, there's no requirement at 6-star for pressure testing, and mainly that's because we'd love to see more pressure testing of homes in New Zealand, but it's still early days with that, and there still aren't masses of rigs available for doing that here. And then at the end there, you can see a 10 Homestar home or a Passivhaus home where you're getting much higher R values, really tough R values there. Windows at R1.8, that would be extremely high performance double glazing or even triple glazing, and then typically pressure testing and achieving very high levels of air tightness, so lots of tapes and seals and that kind of thing.
But interesting, Sam, on that one, still even with a 10 Homestar rating, it's obviously very hard to achieve. It's still for roof and floor insulation below the R values for what UK now have as their standards.
That's right.
Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's possibly a good reason for that, which is that Christchurch and London, they have similar temperatures, but Christchurch gets a huge amount more solar gain. So even in winter, you get a lot more sunshine coming into the home. And I suppose it's probably also around, Passivhaus in particular concentrates very much on air tightness, so that's going to be saving you a lot of energy compared with the UK building code that doesn't have quite as tough standards in terms of air tightness. Okay, so just going to finish off really by giving a bit of a summary of the sort of things that you might see in a typical 6 Homestar home. So I mentioned thermal bridging earlier on, so you see a few controls around that. Maybe at 7-star, you'd start to see thermally broken slabs. At 6, you'd definitely see that in the colder climates, so Christchurch, Central Otago.
And Sam, excuse my building construction ignorance here. When you talk about a thermally broken slab, is that where you'd be starting to see like polystyrene put into the concrete slab? Is that what you're talking about
right.
there?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, so that's 2 things. It will be polystyrene put under the slab. And there's a bit of an interesting one there because we quite often see in Christchurch waffle pod type slabs, which is where you've got these squares of polystyrene, but they don't actually improve the R value very much because most of the heat losses are at the perimeter, and that's really what this slide is trying to indicate, that actually we need to be putting the polystyrene up against the edge of the slab as well as under the slab to be really getting the full benefit.
Okay.
This slide is a really interesting one, actually. So New Zealand has quite an unusual detail that I think emerged from the whole leaky homes crisis, which is that windows are typically installed here in line with the cladding, and that's probably not a bad detail when it comes to rain ingress, which obviously was a major part of the whole leaky homes problem. But it's a really poor detail thermally because if you start moving towards thermally broken frames, the back of the thermal break is still in the cold part of the window. So a much better, from a thermal point of view, a much better detail is to move that window in line with the wall insulation. And so quite a lot of the organisations like brands, like the Window and Glass Association of New Zealand, us and others are trying to get more standard details out in the market around pushing the window inside the wall. I think it's fair to say we haven't got there yet in terms of getting a standard detail that all the building authorities will accept, but I think we will get there over the next year or 2, so that'd be good to see. So I'll move on from there. Okay, so again, moving on with the kind of not rocket science around 6 Homestar. So water efficiency, we require a minimum, for all levels, we require at least a 9 litre per minute shower. It's really easy to get low flow rate showers in New Zealand because we have the Australasian WELS rating scheme. So if you buy a shower, it has the WELS rating on it. So we require at least a 3-star WELS rated shower. And actually, you can use any shower you like. You just need to make sure that you put the that you screw in the flow rate restrictor, which you can use as well as buying a shower that has the Wells rating.
So Sam, does that mean the water dribbles out and I have to kind of run around in circles to get wet in the shower?
Well, at 9 litres per minute, it still gives you a pretty good shower, to be honest. And actually, some of the real greenies out there might go to a 6 litre shower. To be honest, we rent our house, and I've measured our shower flow rate, and it's 6 litres per minute. And to be honest, it's not quite as powerful as I would like. But 9 is absolutely fine. And actually, if you've got a good, a properly well-designed shower head that aerates properly, then 9 litres is absolutely no problem at all. Then moving on to lighting, so typically we'd see LED lighting and some real thought from the architect in terms of good day lighting. And then some of the material selections, so we'd be looking at, this is a bit complicated, so sorry, I'm going to delve into the detail here, which is that you get more points for the more materials in the house that have eco labels, and an eco label is where a third-party organization has gone into the factory for that product supplier and given that factory a stamp of an environmental stamp saying that it meets minimum environmental standards. So the organization that's most commonly used here is an organization called Environmental Choice New Zealand, ECNZ. And to be fair, they have given their stamp of approval to most of the major products and materials that we use in New Zealand. So as an example, jib would meet their minimum standards. And you kind of go, well, if every major product in New Zealand already meets their environmental standards, then why have we got in Homestar? And really, it's looking at the wrong way. The reason that those products and material suppliers have got themselves to the ECNZ standard is because of the Green Star and Homestar schemes that we run. So it's a kind of chicken and egg thing.
Right.
So waste minimization, as I was saying at the beginning of this talk, you'd be picking up points for minimizing the waste to landfill from your site. If you're in Auckland, that's really easy. There are a number of suppliers, Green Gorilla being probably the leading one, that will just take your mixed skip and then take it to their site in Onehunga and sort the waste there and sort of guarantee that they'll meet our minimum threshold, which is diverting 70% of the waste from that site from landfill. But of course, the other way you can do it, and a number of the builders working for Kāinga Ora are doing this, and Kāinga Ora actually really doing a lot of really great work around minimizing construction waste. The other way of doing it, of course, is to then have segregated skips, so a skip for jib, a skip for wood, and a skip for, and actually finding alternative waste streams for those, and we'd love to see more builders kind of dealing with that whole waste issue. Okay, and then sort of the final thing. This is really the icing on the cake. So I just really want to emphasise that we want to see 6 Homestar homes achieved with really good design of the home, but we do have some additional points for then some of those external things like whether the house is got good proximity to shops, to good transport, that kind of thing. Rainwater harvesting as well gets points, and as does having good on-site stormwater management. So that would be things like stormwater detention tanks, rain gardens, swales, all of those kind of things. Yep. All right, so final few slides here. So top tips for builders, really good tips for you here. If you're working on a project that's Homestar, then you pick up points for a site waste management plan. On our website, it's quite easy to find a template site waste management plan, so please do go hook that up. Please make sure you get that site waste management plan in place before you start building. Sometimes builders come and fill it in when they're already 2/3 of the way through the build. We tend to throw that out and not give you points for that. Implement an environmental management plan for the site. Again, we have a template EMP on our website, so make sure you get that implemented before you start. Keep receipts. So we require evidence that the house is built to the right standard, that you've used the right products, materials, and so on. And typically, the way that you evidence that is through receipts. Look, if you haven't kept the receipts, then don't worry about it. What we can also accept is photographs, but I think it's much easier if you just keep receipts. Ensure the quality of the insulation install. Actually, I put that in there not because we necessarily require lots and lots of photographs of the pre-line insulation, but just because, look, it's just bloody good practice to make sure that the insulation has been installed in all the right places, particularly at corners. So, you know, double studs around corners is something that we're starting to have a bit of a project around. You know, we often see the corners of walls with insulation absolutely packed with timber and not insulated properly. And in fact, Brands is about to release a really interesting report on this, showing that it was thought that the average amount of timber in New Zealand walls was around 20%, and that was the assumption in a lot of the Brands calculations. But their latest studies are showing, I just can't believe this. Well, I can believe it, actually. They've been measuring timber percentages as high as 40%. So 40% of the whole wall was timber, not insulation. You know, so you're not getting good insulation outcomes with that level of timber. So beware substitutions. So the Homestar Assessor will have picked up a lot of points probably in most of the build through things like FSC timber, through the tapware, you know, the Wells ratings, through eco-labeled products like Jib, like things like NZ steel, you know, colour steel roofs, that kind of thing. So you might think, oh, well, we'll save some money and we'll substitute, and then you substitute for some products that don't have those eco labels. So, you know, really beware of that. And then a final little one, which is that the Homestar Assessor will come on site typically and check the shower flow rate. And quite often, even Wells rated showers, they only meet that flow rate if they've got the flow restrictor actually installed. And quite often the plumber forgets to install it. So just watch out for that one. Final one here around simplifying Homestar. So with the version 4 launch that we did in 2017, we wanted to really do a lot to demystify Homestar. And so we've got some checklists up on our website, which hopefully allow you just to see, for a typical 6-star, this is what people do. You know, it just gives a kind of nuts and bolts version of the Homestar manual. Please do go and have a look at the transforming operational efficiency. You know, if you've got a bit of a policy head on you, then you know, start to get to grips with where government is moving in terms of the building code. You know, it's going to take them 2 or 3 years, I think, to start really shifting on this, but you know, start to understand that. You know, and really what they're proposing is a number of steps on the way towards, in 2035, an effectively zero carbon building code. So, you know, watch that space. And we are just working on version 5 of Homestar. So if anyone's got some good experience of Homestar and has some helpful suggestions for how we can improve the scheme, then please do get in touch with me. And then finally, some bullet points around take action. These are things that we think you should do. So train up with us. We typically run 4 or 5 Homestar courses every year, and we're also able to offer bespoke courses in-house, you know, if you've got enough of you that want to get trained. Check out that checklist that I mentioned. Hopefully it'll really show you that a 6 Homestar in particular is really not that hard to achieve. And we've got a number of case studies on our website, which hopefully again will show you that lots and lots of people are now starting to move with the times. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hey, Sam, let's fire some questions at you. Thank you for that press. So just help me get my head around, if I, as a construction company, want to build Homestar certified buildings, yep, do I need to come and do some kind of accreditation to be able to do that? Or no, do I just apply and get a...
No. So the builder does not need to be Homestar certified at all. So typically, on all projects, you need a Homestar Assessor, and that Homestar Assessor does need to be a Homestar qualified person, so a Homestar Assessor qualified person, and we've got all of these Homestar Assessors on our website. If you've got a Homestar qualified person on the build team, you get an extra point, because we find that if builders are trained in Homestar, they tend to build, it tends to make the project smoother. So we definitely recommend that.
Okay, and so to become, sorry, what was the term you used? You didn't use accredited. What was the term used for someone certified? Or?
A Homestar practitioner. So that's
Homestar practitioner.
So you can do that online. You have to pay, I think it's $500 to do. Effectively, it's a 1-day self-guided online course with an exam at the end. Yep.
Okay, great. And are you able to self-certify a building if you have completed certain amount of training?
So I haven't talked at all about the process for getting a Homestar certified, but I think
Okay.
so. Just a little potted kind of idea of how that works. So a Homestar Assessor, so that would typically be somebody who's on the design team, often the architect, would collate all of the information from the build. So that would be plans, that would be photographs, that would be receipts. They submit those to us. And then we get that third party audited. So another Homestar assessor would then anonymously assess that information. So no, you can't self-certify. You need to certify through us, and you need to register the scheme through us. Again, we like people to register early, so register during the early stages of design.
Okay, great, good question in from Craig, thank you, which was, is there somewhere we can access a list of products that are already like pre-certified to be qualify under the scheme?
Great question. Yes, so there's an organization called, now I'm going to completely forget the name. I might have to email it out to you, but there's an organisation in New Zealand that collates all of the eco labels and labels that you need in order to get a Homestar rating. So it's a really great website where you can go on and say, I'm building a Homestar home, tell me about all the carpets that meet the minimum standards. And I'm going to completely forget, but maybe it'll come to me before.
That's right, Sam. What we'll get a email out to everyone that's registered and attended the webinar. So maybe if you could find that info, and then we'll send it out. Afterwards.
Sure.
That would be good. Christine had a question, and it was back when we were kind of talking about how you look at the energy use in a house. And Christine's question was, aside from looking at the running energy of the house, so I guess things like gas and power, etc., does the embodied energy, and I think that's a fantastic word, it's a bit flash for me, but embodied energy. So I guess that's things like, is the design actually that allows to capture energy in the house? Is that also accounted for in the scheme?
Yeah. So embodied energy, it is a bit of a techie term. So embodied energy means or embodied carbon is the carbon emissions and energy used in actually making the materials in the first place. So that's not something that's currently in version 4 of Homestar, but the consultation that we did on version 5 of Homestar has proposed that we will introduce it for the next version. Okay. It is a tricky one to calculate, but fortunately brands have been working on quite a simple calculator for homes, which would allow you to put in the various square meter rates of timber and concrete and so on, and come up with a figure for how much carbon, the quantity of carbon that was associated with the construction stage. That's pretty important for New Zealand actually, because around half of the emissions from the construction sector come from that upfront embodied stage. So it's a great question and something that we are starting to look at.
Great. Couple of questions around just what's the cost for getting the once you submit all the required elements and have your assessor review and the independent sign off. What's actually the cost involved in getting a house certified?
Yeah. So I'll give a sort of roundabout answer first, which is that our average certification cost, so certification fee per house, last year was about $250. So each house getting certified would be a submission fee of about $250. Okay. But the reason I've sort of started off with that is because that assumes that you're certifying a number of homes under a single typology, if that makes sense. If you're doing a standalone home with its own design, so just a one-off home, then the certification cost is, I know it's $695.
Okay.
So the cost comes down. The cost comes down the more homes you rate under the same design.
And I'm sure all our attendees are keen to build a lot of houses and get them all certified, so they'll be at the cheap end of the scale, right? It'd be too easy. That's good. And what's your view, Sam, on the kind of magnitude of the changes between version 4 and version 5? Do you feel like it's going to be a ginormous change, or is it more of a tweak? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't completely finalised the proposals yet, but I think what will probably happen is 6-star will be toughened up a little bit. Now that we've got more and more builders used to things like slab edge insulation and thermally broken windows and all those kind of things, I will start to require those kind of elements at 6-star, particularly in Auckland. So the Auckland requirements are not that much higher than building code, if we're honest, in terms of thermal insulation. Whereas in Christchurch, they would be quite a bit higher. I think we'll probably toughen up the Auckland requirements a little bit, just so that we put some clear water between us and really clear water between us and building code. And then I think what we're going to be doing is having some very clear standards at each of the rating levels, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Some very, very clear standards around the thermal, ventilation, thermal bridging, all the kind of performance elements of the home, which we don't currently have. So hopefully what that will do is allow people to really clearly understand what they need to do for each of the different star levels.
Okay, so in terms of resources that people can access, Sam, where's the best place for them to go?
Great. So yeah, go to our website. If you go to nzgbc.org.nz and then click on Homestar, there's all of the resources are freely available for Homestar. Go and have a look at the submission manual, submission guidelines, technical manual, and start. If you're having trouble sleeping at night, that's a 200-page manual. Start to get to grips with that. And then I would very much say do the practitioner course, because you can do it in your own time. You can do it online, and that really gets you a really good overview of what's required.
Yeah, and again, obviously, Sam, I haven't done the course myself, but I think, again, when we're trying to differentiate ourselves in market, being able to bring that additional knowledge and have really well-educated conversations with our potential clients around that, I'm sure that would be a good investment to complete that course and be able to say that in there. It's great. I'm just reading Mark's question. Is the home certification, is this accessed throughout the build or at the end? So I'm not quite
is it assessed? Probably. Is it assessed?
Assessed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I think it probably does mean it. Assessed.
Yeah. That's again a really great question. So the certification fee allows you 2 levels of assessment. So you can get a design assessment. So you can submit at the sort of building consent stage when you've got your drawings. You can submit to us, and we'll review those drawings as a design certification. But then if you want to keep your certification and actually get the stamp for the house forever, then you need to do it at what we call the built stage, which is done at as the name suggests, once you've got the code of compliance.
Okay, awesome. So I hope that's answered your question, Mark. I think we've done with the questions. Thanks so much for everyone that's attended, and Sam, thanks for sharing your knowledge and insights. We really appreciate it. I just have one final poll. We just would like a bit of insight from you. How have you found the webinar? Has it been helpful to you? If you could share your insights with us, that is great and helps us prepare future webinars. So to recap, if you are looking for additional info, go to nzgbc.org.nz, and lots of resources to access there. And I guess Sam didn't put up his email address because he didn't want any questions. So if you've got any follow-on questions, hit him up, and he'll see how he can help.
Delighted to. Absolutely delighted to.
Nice one. Hey, thanks, team. Really appreciate your involvement. Thanks again to you, Sam, for preparing, and hope that's been helpful, guys. And we will see you on the next webinar. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Bye all.